Tonight we have, and I was saying I'm going to try to stick to first names because there's a few last names that I don't want to butcher. So Pete is the state biologist for the Natural Resource Conservation Service. Ron Orton, project scientist with Allied Engineering. Gina McElraith with Grantee Tom Lodge is not actually going to be on the phone tonight. She had another commitment come up. So, but Grantee Tom Lodge was just here last week also at Career Fair. They're a new recruiter up here. Raymond with Casey Harvey Environmental. Stuart Jennings, environmental geologist with Reclamation Research Group. And Sunny with Madison Watershed. She's a coordinator at the Madison Watershed Partnership. So if you guys want to come up, have a seat, we'll drinks out there. Do you have a question?
No, it's kind of.
Oh, you're going to need another chair, aren't you? And we're going to start out, they're going to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about themselves, and then we'll open it up for questions for you guys. That's a nice. It doesn't have to be perfect. Oh,
Safety training, lots of safety training.
Go ahead, Megan. You can start since you're the new one.
Yeah, since I've never done this before, I don't know. So my name is Reina. I'm a senior reclamation scientist with Casey Harvey here in Bozeman, Montana. I graduated here in 1998 with the land resource degree. So you guys have an idea of what my coursework. I got a master's at Arizona State using red worms and paper mill waste. Not exactly the trajectory I thought I was going to take. From there, I ended up working at the Nevada test site, now the nuclear test site, doing reclamation on the Yucca Mountain project for proposed nuclear repository. Different job, very different from grad school, very relaxed. There I had to go through people's security and guns every day. Then I got the privilege to move back to Montana, which was always been a goal. I got a job with Casey Harvey, and now I'm not positive, but I would say we probably do consulting, reclamation monitoring, physical reclamation of actually seeding, planting, amendments, as any country or any company that's in the Northwest. Where we have things in Montana, North Dakota, Wyoming is a huge area, Colorado, and I look at this as a very soil, water, and plant-centric place, and we do work for all sorts of consultants and all sorts of fields.
Perfect.
I'm not going to stand up. I'm Sunny Hykus-Nassen. I'm a watershed coordinator for Madison. I finished my degree in 2009, and my master's research was on subalpine wetlands. I have an undergraduate degree from here as well, double time, in biology / skiing. Let's see, I think I finished that in '98 and then started school 2005. Took me a little while to finish my degree, my master's. Took me 5 years. Had a couple kids in there, built a house, settled down, started the other part of life that is supposed to happen after you're done with your education. But that's what we did. I ended up being in Ennis at the time that I finished my degree, and my husband works for Moonlight Basin. He runs a ski area there. So I kind of fell into this job in 2009. No one had ever done it before, and I had been through an interview process for another job, which I did not get selected for, but it certainly opened some doors, and they got to realize that between the several organizations that are working in Madison, there's a lot of conservation work, but there was not one individual that was coordinating all the efforts. So that's what I kind of stepped into doing. my master's research and all my post-undergrad research was all outside because I loved working in the field and did fisheries work and pond construction and stream restoration and all that kind of stuff. And I get to do that about 1/8 of the time that I thought I was going to be doing it. And it was a little bit of an eye-opener for me to go from thinking that I'd be outside all the time to running the desk. But I have come to realize that in order for effective field work to take place and for all of that fun work to take place, somebody's got to be at the desk, writing for the grant applications, doing all the project administration, putting the reports together once the data comes back. And so that was a little bit of a surprise for me. But since I'm the only one in the job and the first one to do it, the person to do it was me. So I oversee 2 water monitoring projects. I do a summer camp for kids and natural resources. We do efforts with the classrooms and getting kids out natural resource education. We've got an irrigation efficiency project. We're doing some work on rangelands. It's really, really diverse, but that's kind of the way watershed stuff goes. You know, if you're not looking at things from ridge line to ridge line, you're not seeing everything. So noxious weeds, habitats, all that kind of stuff. And you know, every day is different. A lot of field time in the summer and a lot of desk time in the winter. One of the other things that surprised me the most is that you know, I was ready, jumping out of my degree, with a whole selection of great words like riparian habitats and conductivity and turbidity and rangeland health. And I started to realize pretty early on that when I'm sitting down with a group of ranchers, those words really don't do you any good at all. So have had to learn to speak kind of a different language, a different way of talking about conservation ethic and the conservation theme in ways that mean something to the people who are on the ground every day and who's people who are making a living off of their own land. So that was a bit of an eye-opener too. So, I haven't had to hire anybody, but if I did have to hire somebody, a land rehab degree would look great in my book. And I guess, you know, as a person coming out of that degree, I think the field work and the book work is great, but just as valuable is your ability to communicate well with any type of person. So I guess that's what I've learned.
Great. So my name is Stuart Jennings. I am a graduate of Longfellow Elementary School. So my history in Bozeman goes back to 1968. I also have a couple of degrees from MSU, my undergrad in geology from 1984, my master's in land rehabilitation from 1993. And I have been doing this kind of work for 20 or so years. I also have taught soil remediation here on campus the past couple of years. Ridgemaker is handling that this year, so I've been guest lecturing in his class rather than vice versa this semester. I have many stories I could tell. I could tell some stories about Raymond. I thought maybe I would start with the Canadian Land Reclamation Association, because I think of a degree in land rehabilitation as being kind of an interesting degree, and that it is both broad and narrow at the same time, in that you can be a land reclamation practitioner and you can be, say, somebody with GIS experience and expertise, or you can have a weeds focus, or you can have a rangeland focus, or a hydrology focus. So on the one hand, it's an opportunity because it lets you apply for the unique land reclamation type jobs that might exist, but also to compete favorably in those other kinds of domains that would reflect your own personal experience. So to go back to Canada, there is a conference that's occurring today through Friday, and it's called End of Life, A New Beginning, conducted by the Alberta chapter of the Canadian Land Reclamation Association. And so they have technical meetings on several different fronts and all kinds of topics that might sound like things that we know about, like revegetation of disturbed land using planted native and local shrub species, mycorrhizal infection of lodgepole pine and reclaimed oil sand dikes, broad road reclamation in a boreal forest. So land reclamation kind of topics. However, in the morning they had a session, these are the keynotes, so these are the addresses that have broad appeal to everyone, and the one that I highlighted here is called Addressing the People Crisis, Insights and Solutions for Land Reclamation's Imminent Labor Shortage. So that's to say that it's not gloom and doom in terms of there not being any job opportunities, and that our neighbors to the north are in hiring mode. So I thought that would be an interesting context to bring to this conversation.
My name is Ron Orton. I work for Allied Engineering. I've been there, about 11 years. Prior to that, I worked for a company that is no longer around, but it was in Bozeman, Schaefer and Associates, in mine reclamation work, and more hard environmental stuff. I started with a degree at Utah State University in, when was that, 89 or 90. It was a natural resource degree, environmental science degree. I looked at the coursework. It's very similar to the land reclamation degree here at MSU, and I thought that was pretty interesting. I started out farming and ranching, western Wyoming. Started having conversations in college with my grandpa out environmental issues, riding the range, and kind of furthered that in my degree, in that I really wanted to do what was right for the land. My career path, environmental was really hot in the late 80s, early 90s, and before I graduated my undergraduate degree, a company in California hired me up to do hard environmental. So I ended up doing petroleum remediation projects, soil and water primarily, and characterizations, and then a little less interesting tank upgrades and the regulatory permitting side of it. And that has continued through. It's taken me quite a few years. I did work for the state of Montana for a short time as well. But I always wanted to get back around to the soft environmental and the ecological side of things. And when I worked for Schaefer and Associates, I started to get back into that. I was hired still in the hard environmental side. A lot of chemistry, not really my ball of wax, but I think the successes that I learned from farming, ranching, and bringing on through was that providing an environment for instance, petroleum remediation. A lot of the bugs already occurred in soil and water, and we provided an environment for the habitats for those bugs, and it would look good. You know, it was much better in many cases than bringing in laboratory bugs, and a lot of times we'd be more successful. So, and then carried that through to stream reclamation, wetlands, mapping, and a lot of projects would try to incorporate local communities into plantings and soil plugs with indigenous native species that really helped with reclamation, making things look good. Lifeboats in larger projects where animals would flock pretty quickly. It was kind of amazing that some of these relationships work so quickly when given the opportunity. So that that has been really helpful in making me look good, making my clients look good. Let's see, what else? I guess that's about it. There's I started with Allied. I worked for an engineering firm before, and I basically walked in and sold them my expertise and told them that they needed me because engineers like to do square things and angular things, and I sold them on the idea of rounding the corners, creating, for instance, detention ponds that include wetland species and edge effect and making everything look good and work much better. And I think it's worked out. It's worked out pretty well. And I certainly am a jack of all trades, and I try to build relationships with people with specific knowledge when needed, and I put together generally projects with an interdisciplinary approach with other resource professionals, and we've gone through some rough times at Allied with the downturn, and I was one of the people that held on to my jobs just because I did have a really good broad general knowledge, and they could plug me in just about anywhere for help out with engineering, technical stuff, or my ecological natural resource background.
Ron, what's the difference between hard and soft environmental?
Oh, it's just a kind of a buzzword, I guess. We use hard is like chemical cleanups. I would say radioactive petroleum, PCBs, soil water reclamation, and the soft is in what I like a little bit more: stream, wetlands restoration, land rehabilitation, following disturbances, that sort of thing.
Another example of that, if I may, in our outfit is hard engineering would be, rip wrapping the bank of a stream to stabilize it. Soft engineering would be using vegetation primarily.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm trying to figure out how to start now after I've heard some of these other things. There's obviously been two of us more successful than the others in their careers, and those are the two that managed to make their signs stand up. I'm kind of Anyway, I'm Pete Huseby. I'm the state biologist for the Natural Resources Conservation Service that formerly was called the Soil Conservation Service, an outfit that was established in 1935 to help private landowners make a living, agricultural people make a living in a way that kept the soil in place after the Dust Bowl and everything. And I'm from Montana, lived here all my life, and just saying that reminds me that I've often felt bad that I didn't have this clear career path from a young age, like a lot of people. I want to be a doctor, at age 8. I followed this path all the way and became a doctor and everything. But one thing that was clear to me from a young age was that I wanted to stay in Montana, so that's been an important part of my career path. And other than that, even though I didn't have this from a young age, I didn't have a clear target for now. As time went on, certain things would become clear, and when that happened, then I'd really go for it. And I recommend you do the same thing. If you see something you want, don't just turn in your application and hope you get it, but follow up and really go for it. So I'll tell you how it went for me, and I realized that certain things happened when I was growing up that I didn't realize had to do with my career path. But my dad was a Lutheran minister, so I grew up in town, so I had in Missoula primarily, so I had this urban background. But at the same time, two of my best friends growing up, one was Eric Craighead, who's dad was John Craighead of the famous Craighead brothers that were pioneer wildlife researchers, so I had this really strong wildlife influence from a young age. And then also, I was the oldest of 5 kids, and I think my mom was kind of overwhelmed. I spent all kinds of weekends growing up out in the country on some friends' place. I had this agricultural background too. And so I had those 3 aspects that became important later to me and really are now. So what happened is I got a bachelor's in wildlife from U of M in Missoula in the early 70s, and then after that I worked, I'd worked seasonally for the Forest Service, and I did some ranch work and everything. And then my first full-time job during that time, well, I'll back up for a second. During that time I was struggling with, with what to do with your life kind of thing, like maybe a lot of you are. So I took all the courses needed to get certified to teach elementary education. This is after I graduated. Actually did my student teaching. And then after that I just realized, I'm not cut out for the classroom for the rest of my life. So about that time, this job opened at U of M, which was called the Border Grizzly Project, which was a grizzly bear research project. And there was one of the points where, oh boy, wildlife really is my thing. And I just went for it. I applied to Chuck Jonkel there, but I didn't, like I said, I kept going back, and I'd bug him. I'd go back and visit with him, got to know him, and really made it clear that I was interested. And I ended up getting that job, which I worked at for 2 years. And during that time, even though it was, trapping, snaring grizzly bears and shooting them with dart guns and all this pretty exotic, really cool work, and I easily could have gone on for a master's in wildlife right then. I would have been, no question, with Chuck Jonkel's backing there. But I kept getting more and more interested in a long-term interest in botany, and kind of realizing that most wildlife biologists know very little about the primary component of wildlife habitat, which is vegetation. I was more and more interested. And then my agricultural part of my upbringing kicked in, and I really got more and more interested in range kind of thing. So then an opportunity came up to work for some friends who had a consulting firm, and they had a big contract with the BLM to do range surveys throughout eastern Montana. So I left the Grizzly Project and did that. And then we did all kinds of work there. Vegetation and wildlife work both. And during that time, I decided, well, I want to go to graduate school in range. And that's where I went, and I did. In fact, my major professor's in the room, so I better be pretty careful about what I say. But, so I came here in 1980, and while I was still working part-time for the consulting firm, and did that. And then it was during that period of time that I became aware of the Soil Conservation Service, still called SCS at the time. And then that was another point where it was clear. There was the wildlife job, then there was the graduate school in range, and then there was this, SCS, that's where I'd like to have a career. But SCS wasn't hiring at the time, so I kind of researched it, and I realized if a job came open at DNRC, in what's called the Conservation Districts Division, and it happens that SCS, now NRCS, works through local conservation districts. That happened in about 1940 when Franklin Roosevelt said this big federal agency should have local input and local control over their activities, so it's not Big Brother coming down and the local people have a say. So there was another point, I got to get that job because that would be a path into SCS. So I applied for that, and in applying for that, I went and interviewed a guy that I'd known since from childhood that worked for DNRC, just so I could learn about the water rights process, so I could really know what I was talking about in the interview, and ended up getting that job. And then I had to, it took some results because it was 4.5 years, which it was a great job, but 4.5 years in Helena before it actually did pay off, and I got a job with SCS. And that's the next point. You also want to make sure that you're not mobile. A lot of people say, well, I don't want to move to Baker, Montana. But I'm living in Helena for 4.5 years. I got 3 kids. This is disruptive. And to me, there was no question. We're going to Baker, which is southeast Montana. I loved it there. And my kids actually have good memories from there. But that was another point. You applied for that job, and you didn't just apply. You got to go for it. And then, so I was there for 2 years as a soil conservationist, the next 2 years as the district conservationist, or kind of the manager of that office. And then this job came open. I guess I should tell a quick story about this job too. This job came open, and I had the wildlife background to apply, but I was 2 weeks short of time and grade, they call it. I hadn't worked for a full year at the GS9 level to make me eligible to apply for a GS11 level job. I missed that by 2 weeks. That's kind of my overall all-time career goal, to be the state wildlife biologist for NRCS, or SCS still at the time. So what do I do now? Write a letter to Bob O'Driscoll, the state administrative officer for NRCS, whom I kind of knew from working with the conservation districts. I said, boy, I really, that's probably my phone, it's embarrassing. I said, you know, Bob, I'm really sorry to miss the chance to apply for this job. Here's my background and why I think I could be a good person for this job, but you know, I'm 2 weeks short of time and grade, so if for any reason you don't form a panel, please let me know, because I'd like a chance to apply for it. Whatever, they didn't form a panel. So a few weeks later, I applied for the job, and I've been there since 1991. So the whole point of this is that once you see something clear, you know, don't be afraid to go after it. It's important. Sorry, I went on so long.
No, that's okay. Let's open it up to questions.
Forgot to mention that when I worked for the consulting firm, I got to work with Bruce Maxwell. So I first met Bruce. That was a fun time.
I was going to say real quick too, now that you guys have all made it through and I can think back on it. Clayton Marlowe, I'm sure most of you guys know him in the back. I've known Clayton for more time than I was in college. I had a privilege of having a father who was a professor here. But the other is, my communication has never really ceased with the professors and the people that I had here at MSU. Getting my master's at Arizona State and having a professor at Montana State telling me about a position I should apply for, which ended up being my first job, which lasted 6.5 years. And I don't know, Clayton might know a better number. Out of the last 3 years since I've been here, I think we've hired seasonally, I don't know how many we've hired, but we've probably hired 10 to 12 in the last 3 years, Montana State students. 11. Thank you. Yes, Bobcats in this for seasonal work, and trying to get them to come back and to find permanent positions for them, and we're going forward with that. And you're getting a great education, so be confident with yourself when you go forward and look for work. You really are.
And this isn't an exclusive MSU alumni panel or anything.
No.
But with my heart. Sunny mentioned what your expectations were of the job, and so maybe each of you could tell us what your job, when you go into the office in the morning, what does your day look like, realistically? Anybody can start.
Right now, mine's pretty scattered. I'm in the process of finding somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 12 people to 24 for different projects for summer employment. I've also started managing our actual physical reclamation group that's based in Baggs, Wyoming, so I usually know if I'm going to be in Bozeman or on the road to Wyoming by the time I get to work. Not always, but so I may be dealing with something that's happening there, something here, planning for monitoring, going through data that we collected this last fall, sending reports to BLM, to private clients, to private landowners whose land we're working on for a client. Mine stays really busy. A lot of people I work with, they kind of have a better idea. They know what they're working on for the day. And my job right now is, a lot of times, it's to organize that so that I can keep a lot of other people busy and very productive.
Go ahead, Sunny. You kind of told us already.
Yeah, it's I spent, well, we just hired on an AmeriCorps member in October, and he actually is a graduate of Auburn and doing a fantastic job. But I think he went through kind of the same shell shock that I have gone through over the past 3 years, and he got to go through it in like 3 months, where, you know, get the job like to be able to be outside as much as possible and talking to people as much as possible. And it's just a lot of, sometimes there's a lot of time on the computer. There's a lot of dealing with agencies, grant administration. When you ask for $150,000 from the state, boy, they got some hoops you got to jump through. And yeah, it's fun to go out and take pictures of the irrigation structures and send them off to them, but we want a little bit more than that sometimes. So.
Probably don't have the knowledge you do of what that is.
Yeah. But and one of the questions that we're asked is, how much do you interact, connect with the community, others in your field? I have this kind of new perspective of natural resource management issues, and it's because of the amount of interaction that I've had in my own community. The Madison watershed is, by some people in this world, is just held up on this pedestal. And it's, an amazing trout fisheries, and it's an amazing ecological diversity, big predators, the charismatic megafauna times 10. And when it comes down to it, a lot of people forget that with each one of those highly valued resources, there's a direct connection to the people that takes place. And so trying to walk that fine line between recognizing that those values are out there at global recognition and still trying to help the local landowners realize that that's an asset, not necessarily always a liability. So
A lot of emotion, I'm sure. On
yeah. So that is one of the things that I have gained the most growth from, I think, is that community connection, is that, we're not just dealing with biodiversity, there's people that are part of that biodiversity too.
So my day starts by walking a short distance to my home office, because I work a great deal out of my home office, which is great, but I work by remote. I have a downtown office with employees, so I interact with them often by email and phone rather than being there physically in person. So as a business owner, I have responsibilities related to business development and managing the business, but also responsibilities related to clients and ongoing project work. So some of that work I do myself, some that work is done by my employees. And another piece of this that I wanted to contribute is the context that much of this work is driven by regulations. So that's to say that if you work in the private sector, you're often complying with a regulation. If you work in the public sector, you're often determining whether that private sector entity is compliant with whatever the land reclamation requirement is, whether it's vegetation or water or soils. So that is a very useful job skill to have, is some knowledge about how not just the scientific principles might stack up, but how those are interpreted through the eyes of regulation. Because much of this work is driven by those kinds of things.
Well, I love field work, and previously I would spend, sometimes up to 3 months in the field and 9 months behind the computer, and both get old after a while. Let's see, I am right now at Allied. Since I've been at Allied, I've had a much better balance and make my own projects where I can create my schedule sometimes, and then I'm out in the field for a few days. I'm in the office for a day or so. Winter times, a little more computer oriented. Right now, permitting, regulatory. I don't want to say nightmare, but I have a difficult client right now, and it's an educational process for all of us, and I've had to get up in front of some defend myself and the resource in front of some pretty powerful people before that say, no, we want this stream, and it needs to be this wide, and it needs to be like this, and I have to convince them that the best thing for the resource, and it'll make them look the best, and their best project is doing the right thing for the resource. No, well, the stream, you can try that, but it's going to be too wide. It's going to pond weed in. It's going, you need to get a reference reach, do the science, make it happen, and you will look wonderful. And they eventually bought it and had to pull a few strings and worked with the regulators a little bit to go against kind of our clients' wishes and help things happen to the best for everybody and can come out a winner. So just stick to your guns but be flexible at the same time, because you never stop learning. It's just it's always a learning process and always training yourself and others and staying open.
So I'll start out with what's kind of a combination of what's a typical day and major responsibilities. I'm like you, I like to stay in the field, so I've made that happen probably more than some of my counterparts in other states. When I'm in the field, I might be, like the past few years, we've been inventorying ranches, range inventory for people that are interested in being eligible for our sage-grouse initiative. So I was kept in touch with range field work, which I like a lot. And or I might be teaching wetland plant ID, for example, to some of our people that do wetland determinations, or helping some field office with a plan they want some input on or whatever. Variety of things in the field that way. In the office, today and tomorrow we brought some kids in that the conservation district's actually just hired to work on our sage-grouse initiative, so we're training them in our whole process for that. And or I might be revising a technical note or reviewing conservation plan for one of our field people who wants to get certified at the next higher level as a conservation planner, or whatever, variety of things like that. Least favorite part is probably some of the environmental compliance stuff we have to do with a federal agency. So if we're going to facilitate, in other words, fund a project on private land that could affect a species listed under the Endangered Species Act, for example, we need to consult with the Fish and Wildlife Service. We've done a fair amount of that. But we have a guy hired that's doing the majority of that now, so that's good for me. But just a real variety of things like that. That's the important part, is variety.
I think the other part is every day starts truly, well, right before that short walk. And at the point, I get in my car and I have 23 miles from Livingston. So every day is not always a fun drive to work when I'm here. But before that starts, mentally I start work. Number one is, and wherever you are in the industry or private or anything, safety is more important than anything you will ever produce. For you to come home safe every day and for everyone else you work with is the most important thing. And with driving being probably one of the largest hazards you will ever deal with in this particular, you'll spend far less time on a well pad, around mine tailings, anything else than you will be driving to get there on maybe not the best roads. And to me, I think that's through my career, learning that safety really is the most important part, and I do have to turn that on before I start. Even in the office, the field's a little easier, but the office is something that I keep that there too, Still keep your cabinet drawers open. Simple little things, but those are kind of the parts of my day that almost seem mundane, but I know now how much different that is after this many years of doing the work, especially for a client. They don't want injuries on their clock, and you don't want anyone hurt. So doing it right the first time and safely is a big part of the day.
Anybody else have questions?
How intense is,
Good. No, go ahead.
how intense is your work when you're working? Are you like cranking, putting a lot of energy into it, or is it fairly relaxing and kind of enjoyable?
This physical and mental care you want to put together.
I think it's a sine wave,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
some days you're right there at the limit, and other days you get a little, nobody prospers at constant stress. I think that's the human condition, that you have low job satisfaction, you have low creativity, you have low capacity if you're at that limit all the time. So invariably, the work has to have some elasticity to give you some time to recover.
I think building a seed mix or figuring out a soil amendment rate mentally, and knowing that you have all the other agencies that are going to help make that decision or accept those things, versus the day when you get to go install walls and blanket because you're just like, woohoo, I'm not thinking like I was that day. It's physically completely different. It's exhausting work, but when you're on the site, it changes. You're storing all that information. So yeah, I agree. It's up and down. And some days, a lot of times they're paying you for your brains, more than the physical. But the days when you get to go out and put seed in the ground and finally look at all of those things and bring them together, they're as much effort, but the rewards, I think, are the same as.
Do you feel that pressure of being on the clock, like a client paying probably pretty good hourly wage for you? Feel like you got to be real productive?
I'll key in on that one. A lot of the funding for my position comes from Conservation District, which is mill levies on property taxes. So my position serves taxpayers. So that's one thing that constantly goes through my mind is, okay, if I am thinking about my own tax dollars at work, am I worth it? Am I doing something that's really valuable? Am I making a difference? Is this good use of my time? Because I don't want to be in a position where I am ever accused of being a waste of taxpayer dollar, because that'd be too much for me.
And I would add to that to say that accountability is something we all need to have, whether you're a janitor or whether you're the president. You need to be accountable to whoever's paying the bill, but I think you need to be accountable to yourself. And I guess I would take that one step further and to say to this group that I would challenge you to have your college education not be the end but the beginning, is to make those incremental investments. So if you're looking at your day as an investment of how am I going to spend my time, you can look at a career that way too. And like hearing Pete's story about how he would have this knowledge, this sense of what his career was going to be, and he just molded a piece of clay. He just kept putting pieces onto that shape as he went along. That there's an embedded challenge to all of us to be productive and engaged in learning new things, whether it's on the job or whether it's in the classroom. So the college career is not the end of that. In some ways, it's the beginning of a different style of life.
Certainly, yes, and the accountability from a client standpoint, sometimes I'll be, boy, this is taking too many resources, too much of my time, and then I have to balance that with, okay, but I'm saving the client a lot of money by doing it right, spending the time, the detail, and getting everything right and laid out perfectly for them. So.
And that's something that I think builds with the client. It takes time until, you kind of show them, wow, if we did this right the first time and we built this great product, it actually saved money, and they got what they didn't know they wanted, you pointed in that direction, but then they have your faith, and then they also trust you that you're not gouging them. I think that, but it does take time to build that level with them.
Right.
And it comes purely from respect, and by not doing it, by knowing that what you charge them for, they got.
And fessing up to your mistakes. One of my early successes right out of college was I was having a meeting with the client, and they started calling this contractor an idiot and names, all this stuff, and I had to tell him, and it was smooth sailing after that. After I fessed up to him and said, you know what, that was my oversight. I should have caught that. Boy, I could have had a job with that company anywhere I wanted to go.
We had another question.
So if there's one piece of advice that you could give us or wish someone told you your senior year while you were job hunting, what would it be? Like, what would be like the final, like, last sentence to tell us before we go out?
I'll give you two. One would be, always try to have a balance, so have a life outside of work. It helps deal with some of that intensity you were talking about. And, the other thing is always be open to learning. You know, whether I work in both private sector and government, you're always have stuff come at you that you have to learn how to do before you can do, often on very short notice. So, you know, be open to that. Just say, okay, this is a learning experience. Always be open to learning new stuff.
I have two words: have fun. I mean, when you're having fun, and I tell my kids the same thing when they have a task they don't want to do. It's just like, well, how do we make it fun? And that's how I really survive. Let's have fun doing it.
And I would go with networking, because I think that there are connections to others that are in the field, connections among your peers. Everybody wants you to succeed, you want to succeed, and as much as it's an individual accomplishment, it's also a team accomplishment of the institution or among your peers. And I, for example, know of several employers who are looking to hire students, but I don't generally know the students. So that's an example of, I'm an underutilized resource from a student's point of view, but you don't know me particularly. Well, you happen to know me because you were stuck in my class the other day when I was lecturing. So networking, that basic idea of making connections to people who can help you.
Oh, these are great. I wish I would have heard this when I was I think the thing that I'm always struck with is that things are constantly changing. You know, and don't ever be afraid to look back at what you've learned to be able to turn around and look ahead of you with what you've got. And that goes with relationships and kids and jobs and adventures of all kinds. You know, don't expect things to always be in your mind the way they're going to be forever. Deal with challenge because it'll come.
Like maybe, and I guess with family, and I think that you've already heard this from me too. Number one is good data. You don't have good data, you don't got squat the rest of the way through. It doesn't matter what you do with it. Learn how to analyze it and learn from your data. That counts in life as well as everything else. To me, good data. And the other is go for the things you want to do and keep going. When you're tired and like this is never going to work, this job's never going to come through for me, keep going. Be a little persistent with people you want to work for. I hung it out for 6 months in Montana finding other things to do because I wanted to work for Kevin here at Casey Harvey. I had confidence in and have confidence in yourself. I had confidence I could do this job and I could do it well. I think if you decide you want to do something, do it. I think, I decided to start fighting bulls at 34 years old. Not the smartest thing I could have probably done. I still do it 2 days a week for the MSU rodeo team. That's my alumni fee. And I won't be doing it for much longer, but you know, I think, you know, but good data. For the job, it's good data, which obviously I haven't analyzed for the whole thing, but I really have not.
This is a two-part question. I'm hoping it can be relatively quick. I've been looking into graduate certificate work relating to land reclamation. I've got a range background. Some, I mean, I worked for Ray one summer, so definitely can do that, but I want to take it to a higher level, but I'm not ready to go after a full-on master's yet. And some of those are available online, and some of them, like Wyoming, I read about their program. You have to be in person there, but University of Iowa has an online grad certificate. What do you guys think in terms of simply just first of all certificate and also online versus in person, especially like in terms of looking for employees?
I would say it's all good. They're all investments in you. And like everything in life, you get out of it what you put into it. There's no shortcut to, the ideal credential that you're going to have. The more experience you have, the more credentials you have, the better your salary is going to be. As I told you in high school, if you get a college degree, your salary is X. Well, the same is true if you get a master's degree or a PhD. As you go up that training scale, your salary, your career salary opportunities will be better. And I have a friend who did that University of Idaho online thing, and I can give you his email address. I'm sure he'd tell you about it, what his thoughts were on it. And I know the University of Wyoming program director there, and I think they have a great program. So I would say there's not a bad choice to be made there. It's what works best for you.
Stuart, we just created a Land Resources Environmental Science as a certificate program, professional certificate for land resources and environmental sciences. It can be tailored in any number of ways, but certainly could be tailored towards the land rehab arena. But it's a professional certificate. It sounds like it's exactly what I'm hearing requested. So if anybody wants to know anything about degree programs for land resources and environmental sciences, I'm here to answer those questions. And I'm sure Clayton can answer questions about the other degree programs that from his department.
You were the one that bought the pizza. That's your word.
Last question.
Sorry. For those of you who went here at MSU and did the land rehab, why choose that versus the land resources and environmental sciences? Because I know as of now there's those two tracks. I don't know if that was the case when you did it, but why specifically land rehab versus the general LRES?
I don't think LRES existed officially when I finished. So I finished in '98, and I was in animal science, and my diploma says abused land rehabilitation, and I have a minor in range. I think I took a bunch of the same courses,
Right.
460 and all those. So,
I mean, my thought on that is that the land rehab track has more of an applied flavor, and the LRES option has a little more of a basic research flavor. Would you agree to that, Bruce? That's kind of
Although they morph. I mean,
right.
Your program can really be tailored depending upon who you work with, what kind of project that you want to get on for a master's. It really, there's students that are ending up being very much a land rehab kind of student that are getting an LRES degree. It really changes, and I think I'm sure you'd say the same in marine science. They, as somebody said, the courses are going to be almost identical when you get to the end. It's kind of the research project that you might do that will actually tailor it one way or the other. So it won't matter much what you're in if your interest will follow that research project probably more than anything.
This is why we have somebody from the department here to answer these kind of questions. Dr. Maxwell is here to help you guys if you have any program questions about the degree or the classes or coursework or anything like that. We also have Emily Edwards here from the Academic Advising Center. Do you want to stand up and introduce yourself really quick?
Just so we don't advise the majors in LRES. We're not trying to take the place of your faculty advisors, but we like to make sure that all students at MSU know we're in Gaines 130, and what we like to do is offer ways to help you consider how you can add value to your degree. So if you want to consider adding classes in writing, in oral communication, things like that, where you'll get experience that might help you set yourself apart, we're happy to sit down with you and talk about those different options here at MSU as well.
Unfortunately, we didn't have time to ask those kind of questions, but Cindy did mention in her introduction that those communication skills were really important. And definitely in that field. I just have a few slides left to show you guys.
I actually switched.
This is just a slide showing, we talked about a little bit, I think Stuart mentioned the education and how, you get out of high school, you get this pay, and this kind of just illustrates that. As you go up in your degree and your education, your likelihood of being unemployed goes down, and your income rate will go up. MSU, these are some statistics from our graduates at MSU. When you graduate that first year, you'll get a call from our office that says, where are you at? What are you doing? Are you working in your major, full-time, part-time? Are you going to grad school? And how much are you making? And this is some of the data that we draw from those surveys. So when you get that call, it's not a telemarketing call. We're not going to use your name or anything, but please just answer those questions. It's really helpful for the students that are in the programs and for other people that use the data for. Yeah. For students like yourself, it is very helpful. These are some of the in-state and out-of-state salaries that our students are reporting. And this is not specific to Land Rehab. This is across the board. We don't have a huge number of Land Rehab grads that have answered the survey. So I pulled this data from Career One Stop, which is onetonline.org. If you guys, it's a really interesting website about searching out careers and degrees and stuff like that. But this is some national, or actually state and national information. And somebody was talking, I think it was Stuart again, talking about Canada and the growth in the field up there. Montana is actually seeing higher growth than nationally in the field of conservation scientists. So there's some really good news and paid more, which you don't often see in Montana. And then here's where our grads are going after they finish here at MSU with their bachelor's degrees. We can do many of them in-state, which is good news for us. Just a quick few points. We didn't talk much about internships, but that was another question I had. Kind of ran out of time. Attending workshops, networking with people, communicating with your advisor. I think we did that a few times. I think Brandon was mentioning his relationship with Clayton and how that worked out for him. And use the services and tools that you have at Career Services Works.